Asian Pacific Islander American Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship, or National ACE, to bring you today's SBA COVID Relief Programs webinar. Now, we all know that nothing happens in a vacuum, and we're so grateful for the support of our partners. So we want to acknowledge them who are all serving tirelessly in their communities. First off, we have the American Vietnamese Chamber of Commerce in Las Vegas. That's led by Pam Phan. We have the Asian American Group, led by Rita Vaswani and Dennis Rucker. The Federation of Philippine American Chambers of Commerce, Brad Baldia. We have the Global Federation of Chinese Businesswomen of Las Vegas, Yuan Fen Lai. Las Vegas India Chamber of Commerce, led by Harry Singh. The Thai Culture Foundation, it's led by Dr. Christian Giovanni. And the Women's Chamber of Commerce of Nevada, our good friend June Beelan. So thank you to all of our partners for their support. And we thank you for the work you're doing for our fellow business people. Before we bring on our keynote speaker from the SBA, I'd like to introduce Andrew Chow. He's one of the board members of National ACE. A little bit about his background. Andrew is co-founder and CEO of Boba Guys. He has been featured as a top emerging business leader on CNN, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Vogue, and NPR. Prior to a career in consumer product goods and corporate marketing, Andrew started and exited his first in 2011. In his free time, he loves traveling and is a freelance writer and an angel investor for consumer-driven businesses. His bestseller, Random House, the Boba Book, came out in April 2020. Andrew, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. Thank you for having us and everybody watching. I'm really happy to be here. Welcome, everyone. So, well, as Derek said, I'm Andrew Chow. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of a company called Tea People and Boba Guys. And so it's based in the Bay Area, and I'm a proud board member of the Asian Pacific Islander Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship. So we call it National ACE. So we're a national nonprofit whose mission is to serve as a strong advocate for AAPI businesses' interests. And we want to affect positive change on all issues that enhance and advance the goals and aspirations of AAPI business owners everywhere. So, for the past months, we've worked really closely, closer than ever, with our national network of more than over 65 affiliates, chambers, and partners across the country to ensure that the API business community has the most accurate and up-to-date information. Some of you have probably seen us in other webinars, and talking about resources that are available to our community during this global pandemic. So, our strongest partnerships, many of them, like with you all, is the Nevada Small Business Council. So thank you for having us. We're grateful to Derek Yorhara and the members of SBA Nevada, the Women's Chamber of Commerce in Nevada, Asian American Group, Indian Chamber of Commerce, the American Vietnamese Chamber of Commerce, Global Federation of Chinese Businesswomen, Federation of Philippine Chamber of Commerce, and Thai Cultural Foundation. For all of you all for making time to participate today and bring members to listen to our discussions around the SBA COVID relief programs, around the PPP, which I even myself went through, the EIDL loan, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and the SVOG. And so we're really just now beginning to see the impact of COVID-19 on the API community. National ACE, along with the Black Chamber of Commerce and the U.S. Hispanic Chamber, they commissioned the largest, I'm not sure if you saw this, the largest national survey on the impact of COVID-19 on small businesses, with a focus on Black, Hispanic, and API businesses. So some of you might have seen this in the news. So this recent report of our national survey shows the devastating impact on API businesses. So here are some stats. 84% of people who surveyed, and we had thousands that we interviewed, said that the COVID-19 had a negative impact on their business. 60% said of those who did not apply for federal relief, say that they didn't apply because they didn't think they were eligible. That's a huge reason why we're doing this. 53% said that they reported increased debt to keep their businesses operating. 78% believe federal, state, and local grants would provide the greatest relief of small businesses. And we're going to talk about that today. And this survey is really it's really important because it shows how minority businesses, particularly those API businesses, were severely impacted by the pandemic. The data is being used to inform and educate lawmakers as we speak on Capitol Hill of the challenges and opportunities that API business owners are facing across the country. So National ACE has instituted a program to help tackle many of these issues, including helping individual businesses with financial assistance, as well as helping individual businesses restart their operations and safely and strategically as things open up again. So if your business is in need or needs help of complimentary one-on-one consulting or other resources that we just talked about, please contact us through our website. So I'm gonna say this multiple times. I'm not sure if we can put this down somewhere, but it's acesmallbusiness.org. So acesmallbusiness.org, where all the stuff we talked about, the resources are on that. So acesmallbusiness.org. And all of our services are free of charge. We're here to help. Some of us ourselves have gone through the process. So really want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to come out of this pandemic strong. So I look forward to listening to today's discussion. Thank you again to the Nevada Small Business Council and the SBA Nevada for co-hosting this important discussion. So thanks.
Thanks for that, Andrew. You mentioned you had just spoken with your banker. Is there anything that you can share that can help, our participants today?
Oh, yeah, I don't want to steal anybody's thunder. We have a great set of guests today. The one thing I'll say is, everyone is trying their best. I spent an hour trying to get the PPP2 loan. I have not been able to get my PPP2 loan through, as people know, it's a lot more stringent. So, having resources like what we just mentioned, acesmallbusiness.org, or even webinars like this will help you kind of get your application kind of buttoned up and there. So I think, I do think the awareness still needs to be stronger. I think from what I hear, I'm going to hear the panelists talk about it. If as many people are applying to PPP2 as PPP1, I don't know the statistic, but it feels like not as many people are kind of pushing for it. So getting more awareness out there is big. And then hold on, help is on the way. So I'm a food and beverage business for those who don't know. And so our sector has definitely been hurt. So these loans and programs were very helpful.
Okay. Thanks for that, Andrew. We appreciate your partnership. The Nevada Small Business Council has been an MOU partner of National ACE for 2 years now, and we truly appreciate the national support that your organization has provided our members. So before I introduce our speaker, I want to remind everyone that our goal today is to help you navigate and answer any questions you have about the various relief programs that are offered by SBA. So please type your questions in the chat box at any time, and we'll get to them after our speaker's presentation. So without further ado, let me introduce Joe Amato. Joe Amato has over 30 years experience as a business development consultant and a leading voice for business ownership and entrepreneurship within the commercial lending industry. He has been employed as an SBDC executive director, a CDC portfolio manager, and a direct lender participating in various SBA lending and outreach programs over the past 26 years. He has distinct knowledge of all SBA lending and other SBA support programs. In 1997, he received the Financial Services Advocate of the Year award right before he sold his small business consulting company to American Express. In 2017, Joe Amato moved to Las Vegas to take over the district director position and to oversee the SBA program and staff. His impact on the Nevada business community has been critically important in the past several years, especially due to the effects of COVID this recent year. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Joseph Amato. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, Derek. Thank you so much for this introduction, as well as this opportunity. And thank you so much for what your group is doing and the groups that you're associated and affiliated with to basically take this all on. We're all in this together. I've tried to really focus heavily on the minority communities, especially on the Asian communities, while my deputy director, Saul, is focused very heavily on the Latino communities. And we're both focusing on, the other minority communities as well, African-American and such. It's really important that especially here in the state of Nevada, that we understand the lifeblood of this community isn't truly just what we see on the strip or what we hear about in the mining industry. It's really the small businesses, and especially the minority-owned small businesses throughout not only Southern Nevada, but throughout the whole state that are basically struggling, but also surviving. You know, they're surviving because they're entrepreneurs. Especially I find in the Asian community more than anywhere in the familiarity that I've had in the past year and a half with them, in my exposure to the Asian community, and just the resilience and the drive and everything else that makes them successful, makes them sometimes the envy of the other communities as well. I always applaud, and I'm trying to do everything I can to give the utmost support and the highest amount of information so that we can get through this. I think, Derek, there's a light at the end of the tunnel finally. I'm hoping that through mid-year, more and more businesses will start basically being able to ramp up, and hopefully the second half of this year, people are back in stride, or at least trying to get to their stride. That's going to be very, very important. So we'll see. We'll see what goes on. Okay. I guess this will be the first slide we start with today. I'm not sure what was sent to you, but since I'm the expert, I'll just wing it. Well, today, the top takeaways today are basically there's an exclusivity period that started today. It's for businesses under 20 employees or less, and it's supposed to majorly focus on the smallest of small businesses, and especially those that are minority owned. So that's something that for the next 2 weeks, businesses that are 20 employees or less, which, believe it or not, are about 86% of the applications that the banks are seeing anyway. So it's the vast majority of the applications anyway, are going to sort of be have a set aside or be first in line now to basically get access to PPP funding. It's PPP second draw funding, or if they have not received PPP first draw funding, they'll be able to get that as well. In with this set aside time or this exclusivity period, there's also been a change that we've been fighting for probably since March, where Schedule C filers, those independent contractors, those small business sole proprietors that were relegated to using line 31 in the Schedule C, are now going to be able to use line 1. It's something I've advocated for since probably March or April with the old administration, and the new administration basically is making this change. Now, the issue is, which I just shared in a previous webinar, is that the lenders are going to be accepting your application, but the SBA has not retooled yet their Schedule C filers to change from line 31 to line 1. And for those who know their Schedule C or Schedule C filers know what I'm talking about. So I've advised most of the lenders out there I've talked to is to take the applications during the exclusivity period, wait for the SBA. It's probably going to take about a week for them to retool to change between line 31 Schedule C with line 1 Schedule C. And at that point is to basically process the application. The reason why I don't want them to do it now is because if the old system is recognizing line 31 and not line 1, you're going to submit an application with line 1, it's going to get denied. So we don't want that to happen. So that's one of the things that that we're really trying to be helpful in. And the other thing, which has really nothing to do with the SBA, but was part of the new package, the CARES package, there's eliminated restrictions. If you have student loan debt delinquencies, you weren't eligible for PPP 1 or 2, that has now been waived by the new administration. And if you have a student loan debt delinquency with all that's going on, you're still going to be eligible for PPP 1 or PPP 2. Okay? Oh, instantaneously. There's also elimination of restrictions, prior non-fraud felony convictions. Previously, you weren't eligible for PPP 1, 2, or EIDL. Now you'll be eligible. And elimination for non-citizen owners. Now, this is going to be very, very important. Ensures access for non-citizen small business owners who are lawful U.S. residents. So you're probably going to be in this case, a green card or some kind of variation of that, where you being a business owner. If you can legally, if you legally own a business in the United States and you pay taxes, and that you use your ITIN, your tax ID number for basically filing for your taxes, you'll be now eligible to get PPP. And that was not, prior administration did not include that. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is basically the major takeaways for PPP 1 and PPP 2. There's expanded eligibility. number one, and I'll go through that in a little bit more detail later. A borrower can now select two different covered periods. They can either pay themselves the PPP funding within 8 weeks or within 24 weeks, depending on the type of business they have and depending on how their business is set up and what's easier for them in the utilization of funds. The second draw of PPP is really focused on the hardest hit businesses. As you can see now, they're doing a set aside for 2 weeks for 20 and under. It's actually where PPP 1 was for 500 employees or under, PPP 2 is for 300 employees and under. Sorry, I've been talking nonstop for 3.5 hours. It also allows for something that's very, very important. I don't want to get too much in the weeds with this, but originally the IRS was stating that if you got PPP funds, that the expenses associated with the PPP funds were not tax deductible. They couldn't be included in your P&L. Well, that's been changed. Now any expenditures, payroll, other eligible PPP expenditures can now be included in your PPP, now can be included on your P&Ls for your annual, your annual financial statements. Why is this important? Say you got a $1 million PPP loan, and say your business normally does $2.5 million a year, and you got $1 million payroll, and say that all of a sudden, what is normally maybe $2 million in expenses, including payroll, is now only $1 million in expenses because you had to exclude the payroll deduction because of the IRS. The IRS rule states pretty simply by precedence is if you receive grant funding from the federal government, you can't write off or deduct the expenses associated with the business grant that you received. So the IRS was right. They had to write new legislation to say under PPP that those expenses could be included, because give you the scenario, $2.5 million business, normally $2 million in expenses, had to deduct the $1 million in PPP. Now all of a sudden you're paying taxes on $1.5 million in profit, which is unrealized income. And you're going to pay taxes on something you never really realized in cash. So adding this deductible expenses to PPP expenses is very, very big. The other thing is they're going to continue to simplify the 150,000 and under, which, as I said, 86% of the loans submitted in 2020 were 150,000 and under. They're going to make a simplified 2-page document. It's a 3508EZ. And then the other thing, which has really gummed up the works and became really a pain in the neck for everybody, is they're no longer subtracting the idle advance from PPP. You're either loan or loan forgiveness, so you're ending up with a loan. If you did get forgiveness and your idle advance was deducted, you ended up with a loan. The SBA is going to make that correction, actually fund the bank so that for the idle advance difference, and the bank will then basically liquidate or dissolve the loan that you might have secured. Next page, please. For eligible applicants that didn't receive PPP loans prior to August 9th, so this is, remember, PPP 1 ended on August 8, 2020. So now with PPP 2, they are allowing businesses that did not get PPP 1 to go back and get PPP 1. Because remember, one of the requirements for PPP 2 is you have to have a PPP 1 loan. And they didn't want to start PPP 2 and screw the people that didn't get PPP 1. So it's still open. Now, eligibility now includes additional businesses, which I'll talk in a little bit later. Covered eligible expenses are expanded. So remember in PPP 1, it was mortgage interest, rents, leases, and utilities. In PPP 2, it's now mortgage interest, rent, leases, and utilities, plus operating expenses, general category, supplier expenses, general category, any money you might have spent on PPE. So if you put up plexiglass screens between you and your customers, if you bought disinfectant, if you bought gloves, masks, that's all deductible over in PPP expenditures. And then the last one is if any damage happened to your business during any of the riots during the summer, that's also an eligible PPP expenses. The things that didn't change, which I'll throw in here, is remember, in your PPP funds, 60% or greater, so 60% to 100% has to be used for payroll. 40% or lesser can be used for the eligible expenses that I just explained to you. So understand that's still intact from PPP 1 and PPP 2. Borrowers can then accept a covered period to use their PPP loans in a length between 8 and 24 weeks after disbursement. That is different. Before in PPP 1, it was only 8 weeks, and then they changed it later on to 24 weeks. Certain borrowers can request an increase to their original PPP loan if it was miscalculated by them or the bank. So say you were supposed to get $325,000 and you only got $250,000. A business that got PPP 1 can get that $75,000 difference by petitioning the bank that gave them the PPP one. It's not an easy process, and I don't know many people have been successful in getting it, but it is allowable. Remember, like in PPP 1 and PPP 2, your business has to be in business. You have to be in full operation before February 15, 2020. And the most important thing about PPP second draw is you have to apply on or before March 31st. The way Congress appropriated this money, the program ends on March 31st. Now, a lot of people have asked me, will the PPP 2 run out of money before March 31st? As of this weekend, the SBA allocated in the first 7 weeks, $155 billion. They have $309 billion total. So they're basically about halfway through. And that's after 7 weeks. There's still basically only 4 or 5 weeks left. So we do not think with the parameters that they've created and some of the restrictions they created that we're going to use the full $309 billion in the time period before March 31st. So you have time if you have not gotten your PPP funding. When I alluded to earlier, there's certain newly eligible groups that can get PPP funding for first draw. Housing cooperatives, destination marketing organization, 501c6s could get it toward the end of PPP 1. They could still get it now. And there's eligible news organizations that also can get PPP first draw now that couldn't get it before. Still, sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed individuals, business entities, corporations, partnerships or LLCs, 501c3s, nonprofits, 501c19s, veteran organizations, and any tribal business are still eligible for PPP, first draw or second draw. Next slide, please. Now, second draw basically has some requirements in order to get it. So first of all, you have to be 300 employees or less. Secondly, you have to have suffered a 25% reduction in gross receipts. I call it gross revenue in a quarter by quarter analysis. So if you took the second quarter of 2020 and basically compared it to the identical quarter in 2019, so second quarter in 2019, and you evidence a 25% or greater reduction in revenue between the two identical quarters, 2019 to 2020, you would be eligible for PPP. You can also take first quarter, you can take third quarter, you can take fourth quarter of 2020 and compare it to the same quarter of 2019. As long as it's 25% or greater loss in revenue, you're eligible. Now understand something. If it's 24%, not going to be eligible. If it's 18%, it's not going to be eligible. It has to be 25% or greater. Now, what if you started your business in the last quarter of 2019? You started before 15/20, but it was in the last quarter. So you didn't have a full quarter in the fourth quarter of 2019. You could take the first quarter of 2020, which was pretty robust for most businesses, and you can compare it to the second, third, or fourth quarter of 2020. And if as long as there's a 25% or greater reduction in the second, third, or fourth quarter of 2020 compared to the first quarter of 2020, you would be eligible for PPP second draw. For most borrowers, the maximum loan amount now is going to be 2.5 times your average monthly payroll of either 2019 or 2020. You can actually use the same information that you use for PPP 1 for PPP 2. If your information is better in 2020, then use your 2020 information. If your information is better in 2019, use 2019. You can only get in second draw up to $2 million per business, okay? And understand something. In the first go around, PPP first draw, you can get 10 million. So now you can only get 2 million per business. And for and an aggregate. So say you're in a hospitality industry or food service industry where you can file for multiple businesses, the aggregate for PPP first draw was $20 million. The aggregate for PPP first draw is only $4 million. So you can only get 2 million per business, only up to 4 million for PPP second draw. If you're in aggregate. If you are just a plain business, you're going to get 2.5 times your monthly average payroll. If you're somebody in the hospitality or food service industry with a NAICS code in your previous tax return that starts with a 72, you'll be able to get 3.5 times your average monthly 2019 or 2020 payroll. But again, only up to 2 million. If you are basically applying, PPP first draw was a form 2483. PPP second draw is form 2483 SD for second draw. Next slide, please. Okay, so the additional criteria, which we'll review again, is you have to, in order to be eligible for PPP second draw, you must have received a PPP first draw and either have used or intend to use the money for eligible expenses before you can get a PPP second draw. So that's pretty interesting. So if you got a PPP first draw and you used all the money already, then you're good. If you used half the money and still trying to use the rest of it because of governor shutdowns, government holdbacks, so on and so forth, you basically have to just attest to in your PPP2 application that you intend to use the PPP second draw, first draw money. Again, no more than 300 employees, which is different than first draw, which is 500, and you have to demonstrate the 25% reduction or greater reduction in gross receipts between comparable quarters in 2019 and 2020. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about forgiveness. If a PPP loan is not 100% forgiven, there's going to be a 1% interest rate on a 2 or 5 year loan. If your loan was before June 5th, it will be a 2-year loan, but you can ask the lender to extend it to a 5-year maturity. If it's after June 5th, it's automatically a 5-year maturity on your PPP1 forgiveness. That's if you have a balance that the bank said is due when you go for forgiveness. Hopefully you use your money correctly, 60% or greater, 40% or less for eligible PPP expenditures, and you don't have forgiveness. The banks do not want to end up with a loan, believe me. There's no requirement for collateral or personal guarantees for PPP on the loans that materialize if you do have a PPP forgiveness loan. And there's no fees or prepayment penalties. You can pay it off anytime you want. Payments start once the borrower knows how much the PPP loan will be, and the lender will notify the borrower. Now, there's been some extensions where the lenders are not notifying the borrower, even though there's a PPP loan that may be in place, because they're waiting for further guidance from the SBA. So that's something that we're working on right now. If the borrower does not apply for forgiveness, payments for the entire amount will start 10 months after the last day of the cover period. So if you pick an 8-month or a 24-month, so in most cases, I think it's after 24 months in the 25th month, times 10 plus 10. So in the 35th month, you would have to start paying back your forgiveness loan, your non-forgiven portion, or a loan that you didn't apply for forgiveness. Next slide, please. So borrowers must apply for PPP loan forgiveness through their lender. Lenders submit the lender forgiveness decision to the SBA. The SBA reviews it. Idle advances will no longer be deducted from PPP loan forgiveness payments, and that those that had that happen are going to be, there's going to be adjustments made, and the forgiveness portion of that idle advance will disappear. Expenses paid with PPP loan funds are federal tax deductible. We already talked about that. There's expanded forgivable expenses, which we've talked about, and there's a new simplified form for loans 150 and under. And remember this, everybody asks me, is a PPP loan counted as income? No, PPP loan is a PPP loan. If you get a loan for your business, you don't count as income. Even if it's forgiven, it's a grant, it's not counted as income, but you still are able to deduct the expenses. Next slide. Okay, I guess we'll talk a little bit about EIDL, because EIDL's been not reinstated, but extended. It was supposed to end on January 31st, 2020. It's now ending on January 31st, 2021. Use of proceeds is still the same: working capital, normal operating expenses, continuation of healthcare benefits, rent, utilities, fixed debt payments. Remember, you don't want to use EIDL proceeds identical to how you're using PPP proceeds. So you want to segment EIDL proceeds to cover EIDL expenses that are qualified. You want PPP to cover basically payroll and other eligible PPP expenses. You don't want it to look like you're double dipping, that you're using EIDL funds to pay for the same thing you're using PPP funds for. If you do get an EIDL loan, it's 3.75% interest rate for 30 years, no prepayment penalty. If you're a nonprofit, it's 2.75%. And any loans over $25,000 are secured by a UCC filed by the SBA. And there's a $100 deduction for filing the UCC. Now, if you have other debt with other banks, it's going to subordinate to that other bank. So it's not a primary UCC filing. It's a secondary, sometimes a tertiary filing. And eligibility is qualified for any small business, cooperative, or agricultural enterprise with 500 employees or less. That has not changed. It's still 500 employees or less. And also for nonprofits can get EIDL loans. Next slide, please. Okay, there's a new program called Targeted EIDL Advance. The simplest way to explain this is if you're eligible, the SBA is going to contact you. If you're not eligible, they're not going to contact you. You won't be able to get a Targeted EIDL Advance. Now, two things are going to happen. If in EIDL first go around before the end of this 2020, say you receive less than the $10,000 of the EIDL Advance. So say you had 2 employees and they gave you $2,000 instead of 10. What's going to happen is the SBA is going to contact you and ask you if you want the other $8,000. If you got 5,000 instead of 10, it's the same thing. They're going to contact you and ask you if you want the other 5. You can either accept it. It is a grant. You can accept it. It's free money. Or you can say, no, I don't need it. Okay. With the new EIDL Advance, they're going to basically reach out to businesses in low income communities, which they've targeted, and that the business has received greater than 30% economic loss and has less than 300 employees. So the SBA is going to reach out to you and say, we believe you're eligible for EIDL Advance. If you fulfill all these criteria, you'll basically get another $10,000 or get $10,000 for your business. The SBA will reach out to those who may qualify via email with instructions how to determine eligibility and how to submit documentation. Do not go looking for the EIDL Advance, the new Targeted EIDL Advance. They'll contact you. And they started contacting people, I'd say about the beginning of last week, and there's a very long list of people nationally. So be patient. Let us know at nvdo@sba.gov if you have not received the Targeted EIDL Advance application or email and you think you should have. But give it like another week or 2 before you do that, okay? Because this is running through the end of the year, and it's got plenty of funds. Next slide, please. Okay, for Targeted EIDL Advance, there's certain things that you're going to have to provide: a 2019 tax return, an EIN or SSN specific to the EIDL application. You have to do your monthly breakdown of gross receipts for 2019 and 2020, and any months completed in 2021. You have to confirm the information in the original EIDL application is still accurate. And applicants that pass the initial eligibility requirements will be required to sign in 4506T, which gives you the SBA the tax transcripts and the ability to check that the tax returns you gave them are official. Okay. Next slide, please. All right. And the application process: one submission for each targeted advance can be made. To carefully review the bank account information. If you get anything wrong in your application, okay, you will not be allowed to change it. Any bad information you put in the targeted EIDL application, it has to be 100% correct. If it's not, you're basically taken out of the queue and you're never going to get funding. There would be no reconsiderations at all. And that's the way the SBA wants it. The goal is to process completed applications within 21 days. Applications may not be considered complete until the IRS form is received, the 4506. If you have questions about it, you can go to Targeted Advance at SBA.gov. And you could also go to nvdo@sba.gov. And approved, you'll receive an email and the ACH deposit to the bank account you provided. So make sure you give the right bank account information, even if you have to change it from the original. So let's talk about something real quickly. The Shuttered Venue Operating Grant, the SVOG. Applications are still not open. There's been 2 sets of FAQs that have been sent out by the Treasury Department that's overseeing this. And you need to register with sam.gov before you can apply for this. Now, the Shuttered Venues is specifically for, in like our state of Nevada, for entities like in Las Vegas, where you have live entertainment and groups that support live entertainment. Now, one thing you have to be certain of: if you apply for PPP2, you can't apply for SVOG. If you apply for PPP2, you can't apply for it. If you applied for PPP1 and got it, you can apply for SVOG, but you cannot apply for PPP2 and try to get Shuttered Venue. The reason why Shuttered Venue is being considered heavily, it has a big number attached. you can get up to 45% of your gross receipts, your gross revenue from 2019 up to $10 million. So there's a lot of live venue operators, promoters, theatrical producers, live performing art organizations, motion picture theater operators, museums, zoos, aquariums, talent reps, basically that are waiting for SVOG applications to come out. Now the problem with SVOG, and I'm worried about, is there's only 15 billion in the SVOG account right now. I think they need closer to 100 billion. So there, you may run out of money very quickly. You have to be in operation before February 29th in order to be eligible. And venue or promoter must not have applied or received PPP loan after December 27th, which means you can't apply or receive a PPP2. Now, I've told several businesses that they should basically watch the calendar. Is if SVOG comes out with their application soon and you apply and for some reason you're turned down, as long as it's before March 31st, you can go and apply for PPP2. It's a lot less money, but you can apply for it if you're turned down for SVOG. So this one is still developing because we don't have the application yet. We thought we'd have it weeks ago. It's still not done, so we're waiting for it. Once it's done, there's a lot of entities that are going to want this. Next slide, please. Okay, as I said, if there's any questions, you can always call the Nevada District Office for the SBA at 702-388-6611, or you can reach us at nvdo@sba.gov or at www.sba.gov/NV. You can also subscribe to the SBA's newsletter under www.sba.gov/updates, and that will give you the latest information as we get it. That's it.
Okay, well, thank you, Joe. Let's move to some questions here. Daniel, if we have an idle and use it to keep our shuttered venues going with rent, et cetera, since closure, can we use the grant to cover those old costs and give the idle back to SB? I think that was covered, but Joe, can you just confirm that?
Idle funds you use for business operation in a way you see fit. If you got, most idle loans were 150,000 and under. Some got larger amounts. Use your idle loan to basically support your business operation however you see fit. There is really no restrictions. Just don't go buy a boat or a car with it. That's basically what it is.
Sounds good. Michael's got a question. Is a 25% reduction in gross receipts requirement a new requirement, or was it for PPP1 also?
No, it's only for PPP2. It's not for PPP1.
Okay. Catherine asks, is there any financial aid available for businesses that were established during COVID, basically after the dates provided?
No.
Okay.
Not through the federal government, not through the SBA.
Okay. Michael's back again. If a CERC type venue operation shut down and they're an LLC and affiliated with other CERCs, can the LLC for a specific CERC show use the Shuttered Venue program?
I have no idea. You're going to have to get in contact with us directly, and we'll look at that individual. When somebody throws out an individual situation like that, we rather take it one-on-one than put out some mass, feedback on it. If you're in live entertainment, you're an established entity, business entity. I would suggest going on the SBA and look under SVOG and look at the FAQs. That'll give you a lot of the answers to questions you may have or may already have. We're still learning about it ourselves. And like I said, no application's even been written yet.
Okay, looks like some information here. There's a webinar on how to register on sam.gov on March 9th at 10 a.m. Please sign up to receive our updates. Okay. Paige has she's sharing her Blue Social profile to spread word on the tech startup company she works for. Download Blue Social. Okay. Any other questions for Andrew or Joseph? Okay, I'm a part-time event promoter and I put on annual conferences and festivals. Due to COVID, all our conferences have been canceled. I don't have any employees. I have over a dozen independent contractors. Am I eligible to apply for the SVOG grant?
SVOG, I think. PPP, no. Anybody can't use independent contractors or 1099 contractors in their payroll calculations for PPP. But under SVOG, I believe you'd be eligible for the funding, for some funding based on. Now let me explain something. There's 4 different priorities. The first priority is probably where most of the funding is going to be absorbed, especially with the limited amount of funding there is. It has to do with how much loss you've absorbed, as a business operation during COVID, during 2020. So yeah, you're going to have to take all that in consideration. I would suggest, because it would get crazy, I can just do a thing on SVOG alone. Once the application is out, I probably will, especially in our marketplace.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's a lot of parameters out there. Most of them are answered in the FAQs that have come out from Treasury, the two different ones.
Okay. Along those lines, Joe, someone's asking, why is it taking so long for SVOG?
Not the president. I have no idea.
Okay. Risty is asking, how can we apply for the PPP loan forgiveness program?
You go back to your original lender. Whoever gave you PPP one, that's who's going to be working on your forgiveness.
Okay. Let me see what else we have here. Can a bank charge a fee to process the PPP loan application?
No.
Okay. Andrew, I see you're back. Do you have any other comments?
No, I think Joe had a lot of great stuff. I was taking notes myself. Though questions to dig deeper a little bit about one thing about forgiveness. As I mentioned, I went through it. A lot of people ask, how did that actually work? As Joe said, that you do go back to your original bank, but you want to make sure at this point, if you're getting your PPP, to have a lot of your accounts and your bookkeeping really tight. And so for those who know, some people will say the strategy is that I had all my PPP come out of one bank account. So it was very clean. And so when the SBA is looking and the bank is vetting, did you use it correctly on payroll or other utilities? It was very easy to map it out. So that's kind of the one strategy I've had. I've been told that we probably had one of the cleanest PPPs forgiveness applications in the entire kind of bank. So
Well, they say that to everybody.
that's true. They just want my business. Yeah.
So again, Andrew's a board member with National ACE. He mentioned a lot of free resources, www.acesmallbusiness.org for access to that. Joe, can you mention your contact information again, please?
If it's something that you don't seem to be getting any kind of results from and you're frustrated as heck, contact me at joseph.amato@sba.gov. If it's something my senior staff can take care of, please contact us at nvdo@sba.gov, or you can call us at 702-388-6611. Either of those scenarios, someone will get to you. If it's frustrating, if nobody's gotten to you, please reach out to me by email. And I'm answering like 400 plus emails a day. So I will eventually get to you. Some days I can't take any emails. Some days I'm working on them half the day. So I will get back to you if there's something that's that overwhelming and you're frustrated. Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you, Joseph. And we want to also thank Andrew. Our partners, once again, need their support in reaching out to the community. The American Vietnamese Chamber of Commerce in Las Vegas, the Asian American Group, the Federation of Philippine American Chambers of Commerce, the Global Federation of Chinese Businesswomen of Las Vegas India Chamber of Commerce, the Thai Cultural Foundation, and the Women's Chamber of Commerce of Nevada. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Stay healthy, take care of each other, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.